Hi guys, we're going to take a look at doing just a couple things here while looking at a table of numbers. So what we worked on today was figuring out a couple things, the slope and the Y-intercept, and then using that to actually write an equation for that. So the first thing we want to do, I think the easiest thing to find usually is the Y-intercept, and that's just simply whatever your y value is when x is 0. So in this case, my y-intercept is just 0. That's my starting value. It's another thing that we call that. Looking at maybe this guy, so the y-intercept here when x is 0 is going to be 3.5. And then for number 3, we've actually got to do a little bit of work here to find that. So we'll come back to number 3 in just a bit. The next thing that we're going to do is look at the slope. So how is the y changing compared to how the x is changing? So we always, in our notes today, we said vertical change over horizontal change. So the y is what represents our vertical. Y goes up and down. So right here we can see my y is increasing by 2 when my x is increasing by 1. And that pattern holds all the way throughout our table. So the vertical change here is going to be 2 for how my y is changing whenever my x is changing by 1. Going on to the second table here, we actually get a +1 here for my change in y, and my x is also changing at +1. So my vertical change for my y is 1, and my horizontal change for my x is 1. So you can actually write this as just a 2 and this as 1. Before we get to the equation part, the last part I wanted to show you here is for number 3. Right here we can see that my y is increasing by 2 each time. So my change in y is 2 every time my x increases by 1. So again, our slope is 2 over 1, or just 2. But we don't have our y-intercept value because the x, we don't have a 0 entry for x here. So basically what we got to do is go backwards 1. So we take 1 away from x to get to 0. But when I take 1 away from x, I actually have to take 2 away from y. So 1, then we would get 0, and then -1 for the y-intercept, or the starting value. So this one takes a little bit more work to find that. For the equation, you actually have down at the bottom of the table, I highlighted the directions here. You've got a bunch of different equations. All you have to do is select the letter that matches to this, to each one of the tables. But we can do our own work here too. We always said that the y is equal to something times x plus the y-intercept. And this something is my rate of change, or my unit rate, or my slope. That's our new word that we've been calling this. So here, we would just take the number that we found here, so the slope is 2. And the y-intercept is 0, so we could put a +0 here if we want to, but adding 0 to something doesn't change it. So we could just write y is equal to 2 times x, which happens to be, if we look down here in our oval, y equals 2x is equation B. So we could put a letter B here too if we want to. So just a quick review of kind of what we went over in class. Finding the slope, which is the vertical change over the horizontal change. Think about the stairs that we did for our intro. And then the y-intercept, what's your y value when x is 0, and then using that to write our equation. So hope that helps.